think we go into every album feeling a bit nervous, actually. I always do, because you never presume it's going to work. It's the way we work in the studio. We arrive and with no bits and sort of turn on the gear the first day and play. There's always a little edge there, I think, a bit like, what if we sort of, nothing comes out?
I think we felt with Abacab, we sort of like, in many ways, we cleared out all the furniture, And so with Genesis, it was a kind of a question of redecorating a little bit. And I think, we had some areas we hadn't been in before. We had our own studio at this point in time, which obviously we had for Abacab, but it was the first time we were able to actually record in the studio.
That album was the first time we actually did write and record and mix in that environment. The Abacab prior to that was written in the house while the barn was being, or the cowshed was being transformed into the studio. So we actually did finish the album, Abacab, in the studio, but Mama was the real first time we'd done what we set out to do, which was write, record and mix in our own place. So it was quite exciting.
It's always referred to now as the Mama album, at least we always refer to it as the Mama album, so perhaps we should have just called it that. But at the time it didn't seem that obvious, and we thought, well, we've never called an album Genesis, let's just call this one that.
The thought of drawing too much attention to just one particular song was maybe one of the reasons why we decided not to call it Mama, but it seems very unlike us now. I can't imagine us calling anything Genesis now.
Mama's the great example of this album. That sums up how the album worked. The version you probably heard of Mama that's there was recorded very early on, from a slightly longer section, if I remember rightly. And so you captured spontaneity for the first time. Actually, you captured us kind of writing things and playing them very early on, and recording them rather than finishing the song, going into record, somewhere else later.
We had various versions of it. We had the drum machine part, and then I sort of bass pedal and put all these sounds on top of it. And we had a sort of atmosphere going which you knew was going to be strong. We didn't know quite what the top line was going to be. It could have been a lot of things and still been good. So we sort of got a basis down very early and worked on it like that.
I suppose Mama is a song that most people, because it's drum machine based, everybody thinks it's my thing. But actually Mike was the one that came up with that early Linn drum machine sound with going through the gated reverb.
Put it into a boogie amplifier and turned it up incredibly loud, so it's distorted, and got this great sound,
This portable amplifier was just jumping over the ground like this, but it produced this fantastic sound. It made the drum machine sound really, really good. And almost just from hearing that thing doing that, we felt we got a song.
And it was the early days of taking a MIDI cable out of the back of the drum machine, plugging it into a keyboard. So if you had a cowbell going da 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 da, and Tony put his hand on the keyboard, it would just play the rhythm, but it would play the notes, so dun 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 dun. And I was into sort of this sort of John Lennon Bebop-A-Lula Echo thing. I can't see. And Hugh Padgham had brought in this record that had just come out by Grandmaster Flash, which was The Message, which he put on. And this is kind of really, it's hard to believe now, but it's really early days of rap, so no one had really heard this stuff. And he put this like, it's like a jungle sometimes. It makes me wonder how I keep from going under. And we all thought that was great, let's laugh at such character. So that's great. So we kept playing it. And we just happened to be going back into the studio after having listened to it to do Mama. And so we were just sort of improvising our way around it, and every now and again I go, ha ha ha! And, the guys would laugh. And anyway, it became the thing. It became the hook of the song. And it's all because of Grandmaster Flash. And you ask most Genesis fans that, and that would be a million miles away. But that's how it happened.
With the lyrics on songs, you're always looking for something. I think Phil himself had got quite into the stage of where it was more important how the lyrics sounded almost than what it meant in some cases. And I think Mama's an example of that, really. It's sort of loosely probably about sort of a sort of prostitute or something, really. But you don't quite know what she is, But you've got this sort of feel about it.
Mama is this elderly, voluptuous hooker that this kid's got this, this teenager has got this thing about. And he just dreams about her, and she just kind of takes him under her wing, but nothing sexual there. But of course, he just gets turned on because she's, sexy woman.
I think the lyrics of Mama actually is an area where Phil, maybe I tend to think maybe more in Genesis because of the nature of the chord Tony plays. It's easy for Phil to write a little darker lyrically.
It was meant to sound very steamy and sweaty and kind of a bit like Charles Lawton, you know, in a white suit, kind of constantly wiping the back of his neck. Kind of feel sweat and steam and zzz. It's one of those songs, I think, that actually still sounds good today if you hear it on the radio. There are some songs that date, you know, and some songs, they sort of still sound pretty good. And Mama certainly has captured an atmosphere, and I think that's kind of a great example of what we always wanted to do, record these things at the right time before you'd worn them out.
Mama's my favourite track, without doubt. I think Mama is probably one of our best moments in terms of recording. I think it's got all the elements that we try and do well, vocally, lyrically, chordally, and Genesis has this ability to create this dark atmosphere. I think Mama's a great example of that. That's always what I always call one of our little sort of Beatley chug songs, you know, like sort of that Beatles sound they have. A sort of sweet little song, really.
Like Rocky Raccoon, I always think about, you know, which was always a song I liked a lot by the Beatles, and great feel, really. I mean, I started playing that piano riff, and then Phil started doing this riff, and we knew we had a feel, you know, quite know where it was going, and I just kept all the chords very simple, and just sort of had a. You didn't want to kind of go miles in any direction. I wanted to kind of stay where it was because it felt really good.
But why does it always seem to be me looking at you with you looking at me? It's always the same, it's just a shame, that's all.
At the time, anyway, it was much more obviously radio friendly than Mama, which was a little bit of a dark horse for you know, AM radio in America. I think at that point it was still AM, FM, you know.
I was kind of surprised it turned out to be a big hit in America. I suppose quite a sort of catchy little phrase Phil had on the word "that's all," but I think it was just our time was right in America. I think round about that album where things just started working on the radio. You know, we've been playing in the States for years and years, and suddenly we got better at writing shorter songs.
You looking at me, it's always the same.
Home by the Sea, where we were able to improvise. Phil had the riff, the dum chicka jung jung, that, which was the second part, and Mike and I just improvised on top of it, and we made up a couple of 30-minute tapes of us just improvising on top of it, and then went through it and just found the good bits and stuck them all together, and that's exactly what you've got on the piece, and I think it's one of my favourite of our instrumental pieces of all.
That album also was the first time we used like electronic drums, you know, and Simmons was a new drum system that had come out, and it was like playing on Formica tops, you know, little octagonal Formica tops. They eventually started to make them feel a bit more like drum skins, you know, real drums, but it never really worked. But I actually didn't mind playing on the Formica tops. You know, everyone used to have wrist problems, and I quite liked it. But Home by the Sea and That's All and Silver Rainbow were all spaced on this sound, this instrument. And Home by the Sea, the that was all, you know, that I sat down and played that pattern on that sound with those presets, and you know, it had such a lot of atmosphere, and everyone started playing along. It was a bit like kind of comparable to Intruder with Peter's thing, where you just sort of get a sound and you play with it, and suddenly that's a musical part, you know, and everybody jams along with it. So it became very, very important. And Tony wrote the lyrics to Home by the Sea as kind of a ghost story. But even that, you know, this is kind of the interesting way Genesis used to work, and you know, could, if we ever do something again, could work the same way. We'd be playing, and because we were kind of writing with a drum machine at the time, you know, ding, 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 and I started singing Home by the Sea, Home by, I don't know why I started singing it, but I just started singing those lyrics with that melody.
By the sea, creeping up the blind side, shining up the wall, stealing through the dark of night.
When we were writing the song, Phil had this one phrase he kept singing, home by the sea, and I thought, well, I know I was writing the lyrics to this thing, I thought, well, home by the sea, what does that conjure up? I thought, well, let's have a spooky home by the sea, you know, and the idea of a guy, of a burglar going in there and actually getting enveloped and suddenly being all these ghosts around him and everything just quite appealed to me. And also some of the melodic, some of the little keyboard things that were happening sort of felt a bit ghosty. And I thought that was quite a nice thing to do. And then the idea really, which the song is of the idea that we're telling our life story through our songs, which is sort of represented by the third verse of the song, as we relive our lives in what we tell you, which I think is quite a sort of strong thing. And it's sort of what you do in a group, I think.
As we relive our lives in what we tell you.
There are certain big songs that fall into categories. I think Home by the Sea is what I call, and Domino, for example, are standalone songs. There are no other songs quite like it before and after, I think, which is why they're still played on stage.
Instrumental music is a very important ingredient in Genesis music. I think it's something that makes us distinctive, you know. It's for those that know our records well, it's always a lot of standout moments that have been that way. I think, you know, you go back to the days of Cinema Show or Firth the Fifth. They're sort of probably on that particular album set in England, those are probably almost the most memorable pieces of music, you know. And I think on this, you know, Home by the Sea, that second Home by the Sea thing is a very strong melodic piece and it works very well instrumentally. It's very exciting, so yes, they are important.
Beyond the silver rainbow.
Side one, as it were, the old side one, it's kind of got the three best known songs on it. Mama, That's All, and Home by the Sea. And the second side is slightly more quirky songs on it. It's a slightly forgotten side, I think, in many ways, of Genesis. And I think it contains a couple of, you know, of classic songs. One of them, The Silver Rainbow, which I think is a real favourite of mine. You know, it was Phil started playing this kind of sort of like Adam and the Ants kind of drum thing, you know, with the Simmons and just banging his way through it, and started playing this piano riff on top of it. And I just thought it was a really strong song, and I hoped it would go a little further than it did, actually, but it wasn't sort of recognised.
I think a song like Illegal Alien is one of our sort of humorous moments, which in the album I think balances out nicely with the longer songs, instrumental stuff. I think a bit of humour always helps. And funnily enough, I'm not I don't go on too much about the remixes and all that stuff, you know. But actually, this is one of the songs that's really improved Nick Davis. I mean, the mix he did of this one, the new stereo mix, compared to the old one, is so much better. The Genesis cover was, I think, probably our worst cover. That was well dodgy, actually, I think, the Kids' Bricks. I remember that one really was a moment a bit like, look, we've got the album got to come out, there's a tour coming up, here are the choices. Which one do you dislike the least? And that was it. Not a great cover.
Inspiration was very lacking, I think, on this thing. I don't know, we used the guy, Bill Smith, who'd done the previous Abacab album, which we thought was a great cover, we really liked that a lot. And this one, we were a bit stuck for ideas, and he got this photo, and we looked at it, we thought it was quite interesting, you know, but then we actually put it on the album, we thought, we don't think this is very good. And we almost tried to do a last-minute sort of change of the cover. But, I mean, in the end, it is just a cover, I suppose, but it's not a classic one. The idea seemed better than the result, let me put it like that.
I would put Genesis as one of my favourite albums, I think. It's a nice balance of long songs, short songs. And I think probably the most important thing about this album, actually, that's the point. I think one of the main things about this album is the first time we actually went in to record, having slightly changed our sound with Hugh Padgham. And going back and finding out doing this remixing with Nick Davis has been doing it, you come to the Hugh Padgham albums and they sound bloody good. I mean, you know, we had real trouble trying to... Nick naturally did the surround sound mix, and then while he was there, did a new stereo mix. But we had a bit of trouble with some of the new stereo mixes. You know, you couldn't better Hugh's work. I think he got a fantastic sound on this album, the next one.
Having done all these remixes, I've had a chance to sort of look at everything, and you come across bits and pieces that you'd sort of forgotten about a little bit, really, and songs you'd sort of, a bit secondary in your own brain. Things like "It's Going to Get Better" on the second side of this album. Again, it's another one I've sort of forgotten about a bit, but and it sounded really good. I think on this album, and that's quite a good representation on this, was one thing that had occurred in sort of keyboard land between Abacab and this album was the introduction of sampling synthesizer, and some of the sounds on the album. I mean, things like the koto that's used in the middle of Mama, and various other little bits and pieces. But what I used to like to do was, which obviously is done a lot nowadays, was sample like little bits of music and then see what you could do with it. And an example of that is on the introduction to "It's Gonna Get Better," where I just recorded the beginning of this classical album. It just was four cello notes. And I'd originally recorded it to try and get a good string sample, and I pressed it, it sounded awful. But then for some reason I pressed 4 notes at the same time, and this incredible interweaving harmonies, all of a sudden it came out. I thought, this is brilliant, fantastic. I'm doing nothing and it's sounding wonderful. And so that sort of made me think, and I just became quite a big feature within Genesis from then on, really, using those kind of ideas.
There's no other bands really that I've come across or heard about that do things, play, write like that. Usually in a band there's one writer or a pair of writers, or there's 2 individual writers that submit material. But this is a lot like jazz. It's a lot like sitting down in a room with 3 guys and just playing, and eventually, it starts to sound good. And that's the moment you take the picture of, so that when you go back to it, that's where you start from. That's the magic of having a chemistry of people, and that's why, I never take that kind of thing lightly. The fact is that with the 3 of us can do that, and not many people do that. And there may be bits that are slightly suspect, and there are bits that aren't as good as others, but there's some great stuff in there that came out of nowhere, and that's what's good about the band.